Okay. Antwan, would you like to lead us?
Sure. Hey, everybody. So I'll just read the little introduction about our article this month and about the author of our article. Okay. So as we gather in this busy December season, our discussion of Robert E. Quinn's Entering the Fundamental State of Leadership feels particularly timely. In a month often marked by rushing and external pressures, Quinn's framework offers us a chance to pause and listen to those inner whispers that guide us toward authentic leadership and meaningful change. So, about Robert E. Quinn. Robert E. Quinn's life mission is to inspire positive change. He achieved this as a faculty member, author, consultant, and speaker. A professor emeritus at the University of Michigan Ross School of Business. He's one of the co-authors of the Center for Positive Organization. His books include Beyond Rational Management, Becoming a Master Manager, and the international bestseller Deep Change. His book, The Best Teacher in You, won the Ben Franklin Award, designating it as the best book in education for 2015. Additionally, the Harvard Business Review has recognized his paper we read, Moments of Greatness, Entering the Fundamental States of Leadership, as one of their 10 must reads of managing yourself. So I think that's pretty cool. And yeah, I guess my personal connection to this read is maybe about just over a decade ago, I was taking this course on leadership and teamwork where my professor, Dr. Ayako, gave us this to read, and we had to do a bunch of exercises and different things with the reading in a group, and I found it completely transforming for me. So much so that I introduced it to Osama and some other friends back then, and now we're coming around to it again. Like every time I look at this, I get something from it. So I'm very excited about hearing what you all take from this work.
Awesome. Well,
And
thank you. Would you like
yeah,
to, yeah, start with, well, I guess maybe we'll actually open it um to David and Sanat and see what the first impression of the paper entering fundamental state of leadership.
hmm
What I would say this is this small reading is jam-packed with a lot of information. And unfortunately, I only just read it today, which
hmm
so I can't I'm a little like scattered in some parts. I sort of highlighted some areas that I really kind of stuck out to me. Um, Let me go to the one. I usually have to read things like 3 times to sort of get
bro,
an
you're not the
idea of
only one, bro. I feel you.
Yeah,
you
I'm
know,
with you.
like I kind of do like a peruse and I say, oh, that's sticking out. And that's, oh, that's interesting, and then I go back and get deep
Yeah,
into it. So I feel like kind of like handicapped a little bit. But this paragraph,
and don't let us put you on the spot too much. Like if
okay,
you want, some discussion first.
I'm gonna just read this paragraph that I put a star next to and
Okay.
see where that goes. It's on page 11, so it's about halfway into the article. The question that challenges us to recognize our interdependence and shift from a self-focus to a more communal orientation. This means seeking to build a community in which everyone identifies with the group and puts common good first. Fletcher and Keegan emphasize the critical role that relationships and community play in moving people to higher levels of moral development and action. People in the fundamental state of leadership touch others' hearts by building deep, engaging relationships that go beyond the basic notions of exchange and self-interest. Um,
Mm.
and so I that that paragraph kind of like helped me because it gave me some ability to sort of like reach back and sort of draw from experiences. Um, where sort of the first part was like this very like didactic like breakdown of like what's going on with the psyche and I'm like really, oh, interesting. Okay. is that true? And so I'm trying to like relate it to my experiences, and this paragraph kind of really
Mm-hmm.
helped that. And it's really interesting because I've been reflecting on this a lot. My daughter was talking about the idea of like cults recently, and I was describing like a work environment I worked in at one point. She's like, that sounds like a cult. And I was like, sweetheart, the thing you have to understand is actually everything's a cult. Everything is. Every group, every group that comes together has a culture. And that culture either serves to it, it serves either the group or serves an individual, right? And that's sort of how you can kind of measure the positive or ill effects of a cult, right? Is it all going towards this one, specific person and everyone's sort of circling around them? Is there a common good? Is the common good for the common good, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm.
And so then that kind of made me want to go back and reread the article with that lens that I gained,
Mm-hmm.
but I didn't have the opportunity to do so. So it seems that just if I'm just trying to like maybe see if I understand it, he kind of like breaks down this idea of like naturally we just kind of want to like make everything good, where we can kind of just relax. Like I don't have to like push, I don't have to pull, everything's good. I didn't quite understand how that causes a breakdown. If maybe like that could be explained. I want to know more about that. That I think that was
Mm-hmm.
fascinating to me, and I want to know more about like what he's trying to say there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I can speak to it a bit. Don't know that it would be the whole thing, but it'll open up some discussion maybe. Um, so in my own words, his idea is that when we're approaching life situations, organizations, we should always come from the space of like alert novelty and getting into what he calls this comfort state where there is no newness. Understand the relationship, the person, the way the organization is working together. You are not open to new possibilities that can emerge from this alert novelty. So because you're in, we or whomever, the general you, are in this state of just comfort, the brain sort of stop looking towards progress. And it's this thing that they say here at my university that um, without progress, maintenance is at stake. And I think that's where he's coming from. In our personality and our desire to learn and our desire to relate to one another, we have to be at the leading edge of our vulnerability, our courageousness, to expose our out of integrities, to look towards what's missing in the relationship, in our situation, the presence of which would make a difference in terms of progress. So it's sort of like when we're moving towards progress from this vulnerable and open space, um, it sort of almost holds back entropy. But when it's kind of like when we work out, right? Like when we work out consistently, entropy is held back a little bit more. But when we don't, that state of comfort causes this you know this physiology, the relate you find it not only in the exercising, right, but we find it in our romantic relationships, right? What do the partner almost always says, like, you don't listen to me, or you don't date me anymore while we're in this marriage, or they're looking for something to tell them that even though I'm in this relationship or this marriage, we're still progressing and moving forward. And without whatever that um, mutual recognition and mutual vulnerability, mutual exposure of ex, mutual seeing of one another's shadow and growing beyond it, there is this decay into destruction that naturally occurs when we're not tending to something. I feel like that's where he's coming from. that's when I read this paper, that's kind of the summation of what I get. Anyone else could point to what David was talking about, or some gaps that I might have jumped over when expressing that?
I think that was spot on. I think I'm understanding that the question correctly for what David was asking. Is I think the author, I think Robert, what I liked is that in the beginning he did talk about this quote unquote normal state, right? That which was interesting in using that language as far as um, this is just what ends up happening, kind of like what you were talking about, if we do not actively pursue states of growth or put ourselves outside of our comfort zones and stretch ourselves beyond what we know, beyond what we think we know about ourselves. Um, so I think that um, talking about that normal state, which he, let me see how, because I remember highlighting parts of that. Um,
I think it's on page 4
is it? Oh, the
or
comfort
3.
center.
There is at the top of the bottom of page 3 going into page 4.
Yeah, yeah. Like, yeah. So self, he said in this normal state, we tend to become increasingly comfort centered, which are the four different areas that I think he's talking about in the entire paper, right? Increasingly comfort centered, extremely uh, externally directed, self-focused, and internally closed. And I think that self-focused aspect um, is what the part that David was reading about um,
Mhm.
is highlighting, right? So if we're not pushing ourselves outside of this comfort, outside of this quote unquote normal state, which again, the use of the word normal is somewhat uh, I don't necessarily know exactly how to engage with it, but I think again how he defined it in the paper. Um,
Mhm.
Staying in that state, we're becoming more self-focused, um, so that we're not necessarily including the collective, um, the community within our mode of operations.
Yeah.
And this is where what David, what you're talking about as far as like the cult mentality, right? It's like having,
Yeah, I have more to say about that. Now that you guys have talked, now I understand a lot more. But
yeah, go ahead, jump right in.
um, so when I was a teacher in New York City, um, I worked on a couple different teams. Like first it was like grade teams, and then it was like I was in the math department, and we'd have team meetings, all this stuff, and talk about strategies on how to teach, grouping, et cetera, et cetera. And so there's two really interesting examples that come out of this. Like think of like a positive and then sort of a negative. The positive is like, okay, so I'm going to take something simple. Like we notice the majority of our students can't add fractions with unlike denominators, right? Okay. So then we're like, oh, we got to teach those more. And then teachers are like, oh, I don't know, they're struggling. And then another teacher comes up with an idea. Well, maybe we should try doing this. It's like a new idea. And so some teachers are like, oh yeah, that sounds great. Write it up, make a lesson plan. We'll go over it. Maybe there's one or two teachers are like, no, my way works. I'm good. And and so then it's like this sort of like oppositional thing starts to arise. And the question is like, is that person trying to maintain this sort of sense of comfort, right? Like I don't want to change something that works because it works. But if they don't change, but everyone else does, there's sort of this compromise within the larger culture that starts to happen, whereby like those kids are having one specific experience, and then all the other kids are having a totally different experience. And and in our situation, we moved kids like quarterly, between teachers sometimes. And so if that were the case, and each teacher in their own classroom had a totally different culture than the last classroom, right? That creates a lot of confusion within the students, and they don't really know how to like participate. And it starts to bring up a sense of a lack of community. And they voice that. The kids are like, as honest as can be. Um, and so that was something that was like always a problem, just kind of part of the game, I guess. There's always like, oh, so and so is never going to go for it, and then you're always like, you come up with this really amazing idea for something, you get almost everyone on board, but this one person is like, no, it's not going to work, and then because that one person doesn't do it, the whole group kind of, it starts to fall apart. And
Yeah.
and it was interesting because he ties this to like integrity. I believe that was the word he used, right? Where like when you get sort of when you're leaning into this state of comfort, maintaining comfort, and I kind of like want to use the word stagnation maybe to some extent, although maybe that's not appropriate, but it does cause you to like lose a level of integrity, because like it's okay, I'm in this place to work as a team to help my fellow teachers do the best for the kids. My team is now saying this is the best thing, but I'm like, no, I'm not going to do that. Right. And that's like a compromise of integrity there, in my view, I think. Um, I
Well,
don't know.
it is on a certain level, right? Like I think one of the things, um, which I think ties into this, which was the use of the word subordination,
Mhm.
right? Which was like, wait a second, what is that? How is that related to leadership to be a subordinate? Like, wait, what? Um, but kind of like that paragraph that you read that talks about this interdependency, this interdependence, and the fact that we live in a social ecology, and how Robert put it in the example that that you shared as far as the group of teachers, and we do this often, is that we look at the system of people in leadership as, oh, the system is closed and it's interdependent dependent on the members, and not factor in the beneficiaries of that system. There's an also interdependency with that system as well, right? So to have, and I think in the paper, which I liked, which what he's talking about as far as subordination is to the surveys and feedback of the beneficiaries of those systems and how they're interdependent. So in the example that you gave, having the students have a say in how the system works is probably super valuable, right? How do you learn how to add fractions with different denominators, right? Um, and having that survey. And here's the thing, we probably all have an experience with that, where when we correct a teacher, like we corrected a teacher and the teacher doesn't like it, right? No, it's like, you can't correct me.
How dare you?
How dare you correct me, right? Um, but we often overlook these um, the interdependencies of these systems that seem to be separate at some level, but they are fundamentally interconnected. Um, we obviously we see that more and more now in the business, right? It's like we have the customer and then the employees, and then we have difference between the employees and the management, and then the difference between the management and the directors, and the difference between the directors and the shareholders, and all of these different things that um, that operate interdependently, but we in our day to day we tend to separate them, because in order to engage with them in a high integral state is going to require us to be outside of our comfort zones.
Yeah, yeah. And maybe even find ourselves in a place of subordination.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Even though we're the CEO, or even though
Right.
we're the whatever level.
And that's why I kind of brought up the cult thing, because I feel like that is the sort of like trigger in a person's mind sometimes, where it's like, oh, you want me to become vulnerable? Like, you want me to like step away from like my comfort zone, the thing that gives me power, you know? And because like, it was always this one teacher who was a senior teacher and a good teacher, but kind of like set in her ways type of thing. And um and that was kind of always the most difficult person to get on board, because it was like, well, you're asking me to take directions from someone who's 20 years younger than me, and I don't like that, you know. And she came from a very traditional English Caribbean education system, where it was a very clear hierarchical structure, you know. I don't mean to pick on her for this, but very good person. But for this particular thing, it was often like, you know, and I get it, because I'm a lone wolf to the bone. Like, I am the first person to be like, this is some culture, like, you're at what, but I started to learn in those circumstances, like, I'm good at certain things. Other people are good in other ways. In combination, we're a great team, right? But when I try to do it on my own, yeah, this one aspect is great, and then I'm kind of not doing so great in all these other ways. And it's like blind spots. It's not even that like I know about it. It's just like this weird blind spot, and people can tell you about it. And you're like, okay, I'm trying to recognize that. But when you work as a team, you delegate, and you're like, all right, you've got this, and then the strengths, sort of like come together. And that also, when there's this teamwork thing happening, it helps you to see and accept those areas where you're weaker, and then improve upon them. Because then you're like, okay, I'm subordinate to Sarah with regards to, you know, data analysis or something like that. I have no patience for it, but I know how important it is. And whoa, I'm watching her do it. Hey, can you maybe show me a little bit how you use that? And that's me taking a subordinate position to her, you know? Um, I mean, I think I'm getting it. I think I'm understanding it. Maybe I'm not, but
I think that's amazing what you just spoke about too, and even the examples you just spoke about too, because it links you back to one of his first questions that we have to ask ourselves. But if we're in a group, I guess everyone in that group has to ask themselves that question: what results do I want to create? And if the group is already on one accord about what the results they want to create, then they can ask themselves that next question: am I internally driven? Am I clear about what I provide to this group so that these results could happen? Next one: am I other focused? If I'm other focused, then I realize that how I feel about it in the end doesn't matter because it's about the kids. So if it's clear that this idea works for the kids, can I be other focused enough to be subordinate to what the collective plan is? And then that last question: am I externally open? Which is basically another way of saying, can I be adaptable? Can I be open and adaptable to what the collective mission and goal is? Or am I going to put my stake in the ground because I don't want to? I'm me centered. I'm in the normal, according to Robert, I'm in the normal state where it's about what I want and not this relationship between the individual and the collective. Sana?
I
Hey.
hope you can hear. I hope you can hear me properly with the music in the back. Um, yeah, this is actually a really good. It's like this topic is actually really in sync with what's happening with me too. Um, Regarding leadership, I'm sort of in a crossroads where I'm at right now as an instructor. I'm like a leader figure. I like to lead too, no matter if I'm an employee and I'm just an instructor. I like to be innovative and show the team how to improve things. But the upper management, if they don't want to put the time in it, what can you do, right? It sort of drives us to look for another job. So I went and looked for another job. I got a job at a cafe. It's a place that is new management. They're inventing a lot of new dishes. They're inventing a lot of new ways of doing it. So I like that. I like to be where it's very innovative, where they're stepping up a notch and doing things differently. That's because that's my vibe. If I see in a company it's being stale, it's not, there's no room to grow, there's no room to increase your salary, then it sort of puts employees like us at a downplay, especially when we're very, and here's the thing, people who are very good employees are also big leaders too. We are naturally leaders. So if you want to, you have to listen to employees who are a value to the team like that. So I like this topic. It's a very tricky sort of play on being humble and then being accepting of people who may be younger than you, may not have as much experience than you. But everyone has something to offer. So it's nice to kind of listen. That's what I told when I went for the interview. I was like, people constantly underestimate me. I just want someone not to underestimate me and my ability, and I constantly kind of go meet people like that, and I have to break that barrier first. Even as a woman, it's like, okay, you're a male manager, okay, but I may have something more valuable to offer as a woman. There's a gender kind of play there too. That sort of is a barrier sometimes. Or also, you don't have a degree. Oh, you don't have a professional degree. You're self-taught or whatever. I have a lot of experience. I can tell you that. I have a lot to offer that a degree is not going to tell you. That's all book knowledge in the end of the day. So that's another barrier I find, I'm trying to get through. Um, so hey, you have a talent, you got the talent. You have to work with that as a leader, and be confident about it. So I'm maneuvering the maze when it comes to the job world, which is new to me. So I'm learning. But yeah, that's what I gotta say.
Hey, thank you for sharing.
You're welcome.
I read this section, a paragraph, well, 3 paragraphs, but they're short, that stick out to me, that like want to get you guys' thoughts on it and share my thoughts on it, I guess. This section is called internally closed, and it's on page 6. It's his idea of what internally closed is. He says, in a world that is constantly changing, there is a pressure to adapt. While we may be comfortable with incremental, controlled adaptation, we tend to resist the process of deep change, which requires the surrender of control and the risk of real-time learning. That idea of real-time learning really stuck out to me. When we receive feedback that suggests we need to make deep change, we tend to engage in various forms of denial. We distort the message we receive, insisting that the world is still best represented in the images and categories derived from our past experience. This is fire to me right here. This process is also normal. External feedback that suggests we need to change is often met with the deployment of defensive routines. As we protect our existing images and categories, we experience the disintegration or separation of knowledge and learning. That's the sentence. As we protect our existing images and categories, we experience the disintegration or separation of knowledge and learning. We adhere to what we know and resist adapting to the changing world. As we do this, we tend to experience feelings of defensiveness and stagnation. In summary, the normal state is a condition of equilibrium in which natural entropic forces tend to operate. In the normal state, we tend to become comfort-centered, externally directed, self-focused, and internally closed. We tend to become increasingly disintegrated and self-deceptive, and therefore hypocritical. This is just fire to me. Like, I was reading this like, yes. I can relate. I can so relate to this. We tend to become increasingly disintegrated and self-deceptive, and therefore hypocritical. Paradoxically, as we described below, this seemingly negative sentence is actually an identification of an enormous source of potential for transformational influence. It's fire. Because in my opinion, once a person has awareness, once I have awareness of my out of integrity, being externally closed, the relationships that I'm having get to benefit from this, hopefully, because I get to come back in integrity, get to expose my vulnerability. Oh, I've been out of integrity. I've been holding on to identification, a way of being that no longer serves me and doesn't serve you. It doesn't relate to the world we're living in. And because of that, I've been keeping this relationship, person, place, or thing in a character that is disintegrating the relationship, but also disintegrating my relationship with self. The destruction of the relationship between knowledge and learning, no real-time learning, because my images and my identification have become a callus over my third eye, the CEO of my brain. I'm operating all from conditioning and identification with whether it's my religion, whether it's my trauma, whether it's this goal that I created that Ben was supposed to change, but I never decided to change it because I'm so close to it. I'm not able to pivot and operate with true adaptability in real time because these images, this identification, these ways of being have become a callus over the CEO of my brain, over my heart. And so I'm stuck in ways of being that no longer serve me or the people I love. And it's probably reintroducing trauma and toxicity into my life and my relationships. This externally closed, not being able to relate to the environment, completely just is so relevant to me in my life and how I'm hopefully continually waking up to different iterations of myself.
Yeah, that part. Also, I mean, the entirety, I think what David said, like reading that normal state entirety and the psychological thing that's happening, it's like, wait a second, what is this? Like, and that to me also was a big one. I highlighted that, surrender of control and the risk of real-time learning, and how he the separation of knowledge and learning. I wrote a comment on that, like highlighted, wrote a comment saying the difference between scholars and mystics, the between the knowledge and the learning, and the mystics. And I love even in the article how he kind of tied down some kind of spiritual aspects in it as well, right? Saying like, hey, this is also not uh, it's not separate from the entirety of the individual, or the entirety of the self, and how the self image goes. Um, but this idea that difference between knowledge and learning, or as the mystics would say, the difference between knowledge and gnosis, right? This deep, what he called deep change, or also deep learning, or also um, this real-time learning. Something that's fascinating, which kind of connects to our, even the last maybe 3 calls or 4 calls, when we start talking about receptivity, right? Because receptivity and real-time learning is like, it's pretty much one and the same, or like doing this with each other. Um, so yeah, that was big. And also for me, like looking at myself and seeing like, okay, what areas in my life am I internally closed? What areas of my life have I decided to close the gap, close the cap of learning, and say that I know this, and shunned away the real-time learning aspect of things. Um, which is so freaking funny, man. Hold on a second. Which is interesting because um, in another group as well, we're learning about this idea of talking about this idea of knowledge as well. Um, and there's this Arabic proverb, I guess, um, that talks about this knowledge and idea of knowing, that I would like to read here, because it's talking about how does, in what areas, like this difference between knowledge and knowing, right? I mean here, between knowledge and learning, as Robert puts it. When would I, or how can I know, or maybe know is not the right word, discern. How can I discern to say, okay, this knowledge that is acquired, or real-time learning, is suitable enough for action, right? Or it still requires this iteration of real-time learning. So this Arab proverb, I guess, or something like that, it distinguished 4 people or people in 4 categories. He that knows, um, let me see. Oh, he that knows not and knows not that, meaning he who doesn't know and knows that he doesn't know is a fool. Shun him. He that doesn't know and knows, oh, sorry. He who doesn't know and doesn't know that he doesn't know is a fool. Shun him. He who doesn't know and knows that he doesn't know is good. Teach him. He that knows and doesn't know that he knows is asleep. Awake him. He that knows and knows that he knows is wise. Follow him. So this, which also, now that I'm just thinking out loud over here, which also this connection between being and becoming, right? This between knowledge and learning, this real-time learning that's happening. Right, because I can also see the what can be the shortcomings of real-time learning in certain areas, right? And what is, if there's any, is there any shortcomings to real-time learning?
That's the question you're putting to the group?
Yeah.
Because I have so much I want to say, but I've talked a lot. Somebody else talk, and I'll talk after.
I
What do
I
you
feel
mean
like
that there's no shortcomings to real-time learning? That's the real that's the real learning. That's where you acquire real wisdom and through experience. This is what Sufis talk about. This is another level where you actually experience spirituality, not just read about it. You step into the world and modify, as we call it, right? So experience overrides anything else. Okay, trust me. That's it. I'll stop there. That's good enough.
I I would
Really beautifully expressed. Go
I
ahead,
would
David. Sorry
follow
about
that with
that.
a question: is that, is there any learning that's not real-time learning?
I like that question because I feel like at some point, at some level, I mean, there's probably degrees of wakefulness. You know, kind of like how when you wake up in the morning, sometimes you're just groggy and yeah, maybe and sometimes you wake up and it's like, I am here, I am ready for the day. And I feel like when he's talking about real time learning, he's speaking about what the Sufis say about student of the moment. He's speaking about what Sana is expressing, like being awake, like the Buddha say, I am awake, meaning your awareness, you're completely awake to the moment. Like you can respond, you're just awake. But to have the disintegration of knowledge and learning means that, like, how do I say this without, I mean, I'm looking for the most political correct way to say it, but I might not have it. So maybe you guys can help me with this.
But I mean, like
When
you
you
said,
learn everything from a,
it's like you
what'd
close
you
it
say, bro?
off. It's like you said before. It's like you're just closing off your CEO. You know, what the disintegration is like. I'm not going to take information that's coming to me and integrate it and then act on it. I'm pushing it off, right?
There,
That
exactly. Oh no, you go first.
um, you know, as you were like reading those paragraphs, I'm just like thinking, God sounds like our government, you know? Like it's just like all these things keep happening and it's like this is going to be the wake up call. They're going to like change, something's going to happen, you know? Like whatever, like you could pick 20 different things out of what's going on in our news cycle and you could say like this has just been going on and on and on. Everyone's like, what are you doing, you know? And nope, nope, nope. Like I don't know if you've ever watched the you know, one of these like state rep spokespeople talking to the journalist about like what's going on in Israel, and it's just such a profound level of cognitive dissonance. You're just like, holy shit. I mean, you can't. I don't even understand how those journalists are in that room with that dude and not tearing him apart because of the level of just like, oh no, what are you talking about? No, no, no. You know, it's just like months and months and months. That's a perfect example of an individual the facts are like coming like torpedoes into his brain, and shield up. I'm not going to hear any of it. La 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 la, you know? And and that's like the experience you have when you're at work and you're like working in a team, and all of a sudden there's just this one person that's just like, nope, not doing it, you know, and but I mean, it's so obvious. Like, no, no. And so they've sort of cut off their willingness to learn. They're like, no, I'm stopping right there. You can throw. I hear the facts, but I am choosing to not integrate that into reality.
Yeah. Yeah, and there and a lot of these things are hidden. It's like unless you experience it, even our triggers, even what's kind of inside with the whole realm of alchemy, turning into gold. There's certain things within us, sediments that are kind of that are hidden that only come out when through experience of it. Certain triggers, you know, that the cleansing that happens in spirituality. You can say all you want that don't get angry, but something will come specifically that you get triggered by, will show your anger, and you thought, oh, I had this mastered. No, you didn't actually. And it's constantly life throws at you certain things that continuously put you in the realm of experiencing it and then mastering it and then moving from that state, you know? So I don't know, even with my art, very specific things, even with my certain awakening, I remember I stepped into this realm of like experiencing my work and like manifesting everything that I was painting. And it was so amazing to me that I could, from my mind, I was like experiencing whatever I was thinking was happening to me. And I was like, oh my God, what is this place I've stepped into? It's so different than just looking at it from a bystander point of view, you know. It was like, oh my, what is this, you know? And integrating that spiritual experience in, you know, actually integrating it, not just talking about it anymore, you know. And this is what they say about saints too. For you to be a real guide, you have to come from a place of actually experiencing the murid or the follower, what he's going through. That's the only way you can give real guidance, even to a follower. You know, and this is what psychics do too. People who mirror the other person, the way they can give guidance is that they put themselves in the person's shoes and they feel their energy, and from there they give advice, you know. Not I am separate and you are here. No, you got to be one with that person, you know, constantly one with your environment to be able to fully experience it. So yeah. My artistic's 2 cents, guys. Sorry.
No, don't be sorry. It was beautifully expressed. Thank you for it. Thank you both, all of you, for it. And Abe, I wanted to invite you if you wanted to say anything about anything you've heard or any thoughts you might have. You want to jump in there on anything, on Tom's question, David's other question, or what Sana said, or any of your own personal thoughts.
Nothing that is a personal, some things that came up for me when I was hearing you all express, which I don't know if it's like a complete left field, so I don't want to add something that was out of the ballpark or something like that, of those words, was me sitting with these past few weeks, the concept of a scholar. Like, what is that concept of somebody who is a scholar at something? And then up until recent, especially in the world of psychology, there was this new term, which is really an old term, but it's English, the scholar practitioner, which is still missing something. The scholar practitioner is still missing something. And that's essentially pointing to somebody who is in practice. So they're engaged actively with things in the materials that they've learned. What could it be missing? There's this concept that I've been playing with through the dissertation process. Is there something possible like a scholar practitioner integrator? What would somebody like that actually materialize and appear to be? Now, bending it back to this, to what I heard expressed today, and this point of intersection of the last PDF that we read, the Plain is Good. there was 4 things that I noted. It's like recognizing our resistance to change, valid. Surrendering to the illusions of control, valid. Opening ourselves to feedback, learning, and higher aims, valid. And committing to practices that disrupt comfort and build presence, whether spiritual, psychological, or practical, valid. That leads me to say then, is there a possibility for somebody to be an experience junkie and not know anything? Yeah, I've seen people like that. They just chase experiences and chase systems, and we've come to the term in the 70s, spiritual bypassing. They'll use things to wear their masks that they've doing that. So there's somebody who can be an experience junkie in the same way that there can be somebody who's an information junkie, just an academic, doesn't know anything else, but that's their guys. And then the last thing is the weight and the power of community, or the community, the social tether and the relationships that are bound and surrounded by you. If they're reflecting something for me that's waking me up to see certain things that I'm so rigid and so tight-assed about, and somebody knows, so to speak, whether it's a really challenging job, like position at a job where it's so conflicting and people are just, this is the way and this is the only way, thank God. Thank God that that's giving me the opportunity to wake up. What a shock. To other situations as well. But there must be this level of like a delicate balance to it, because at some points the shock can be so hard for some people that it can really take time, which is all we really have, to bounce back, even though real learning is happening in the process. I think the last thing was sitting with that question that you said, or that question that you're sitting with, Osama. I find it entertaining that, man, sometimes things happen cyclical. I may be presented with a situation or an experience or reading something that completely brings me down an avenue of things that I thought I'd work through or things that I thought were done, but it's shining a light in a different way to give me the opportunity to see. So real learning, it's always happening, but the buy-in, the payment is if we're awake or an active participant in our life. That's the tuition. That's the for me, that's my tuition that I have to pay. And that requires work. It requires dare I say it, it requires effort, even though it's an effortless thing, but it requires effort to brush things off. Like there's something that happens into it. It certainly may appear like hearing you guys speak, there's moments in people that may make it look very passive, but I feel like it's a very active process. Because somebody like at the job that I was hearing you talk about, David, can just be like an automatic zombie in the system and just fucking keep going and just a cog in the wheel, motion and motion and motion. But being active in that process seemed to bring about turmoil. Hearing you say it seemed like it was a tough situation. It seemed like it could be a really tough situation, being active in that. And I'm using the word thank God, kind of reminding myself when I picked up Osama from the airport. He beautifully, poetically, shined the light on something I was using today in practice. Both ways, self and he's talking about it. If we can be in the state of thankfulness, pointing to that thing that I'm trying my best to articulate here, which is so strenuous and challenging for me, is being an active participant in my life. It leads me to this level of collaboration that regardless of the situation or scenario, I can transcend and include it rather than transcend and throw it out, like in the garbage. And is very hard for me. I don't know for you all, but it's very challenging. And I'm grateful for the community, because this is just another set of mirrors to give me that opportunity to see in a different way. That's how I hold it, at least. I'm trying to.
Beautifully
That's
shared. Thank you.
absolutely
Thank you for
gorgeous.
sharing, bro.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely beautiful. And and um and like I think even in what you were saying, answering that question of the quote unquote shortcoming, I think you answered the question, but my question wasn't even clear. but you still answered it, right? You know, the shortcomings of real-time learning. But I think this, what you said about experience junkie, right, is just somebody who's after experience, or you know, hey, I just want to be in the moment. I want to be in the moment. It's the moment is my teacher. I want to be in the, you know, all that, but without this integration within that transcending. So it's the container of knowledge, kind of like the those four categories that I read. The container of the knowledge or the learning doesn't become pointed, or doesn't uh, turn into knowledge. It doesn't integrate to become this knowledge, um,
Can I say something
and
real
then
quick?
wisdom.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. I didn't realize that you were still talking. I jumped in there.
Can I add one thing to that? To add to that, which connected to David.
Before you do, I want to make sure you guys have the understanding of what he was saying about the disintegration of the relationship between knowledge and learning. I'm asking that question just because it sounds as if you might be speaking just about, you know, real-time learning separate from the knowledge. And he, in his speaking of it, is saying that knowledge and real-time learning should be integrated together, not separated. But when I'm listening to you guys, it sounds like you're speaking of something different.
No, we're talking about the same thing. He's saying that in the internally closed scenario, these things are separated.
Disintegrating, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So in the internally closed, which is part of his quote unquote normal state, right? Not the transcendent. These things are disintegrated, right? They're not integrated together. Um,
So then the
which
knowledge junkie or the experience junkie, they would be a part of the internally closed, not a part
exactly,
of the fundamental state of leadership.
exactly. Yeah, yeah, we're talking about the same thing.
There's a
You
thing I'm
too,
gonna
Abe?
add. There's a thing I'm gonna
Go ahead,
add.
Tom, I'm sorry.
Sorry. There's a thing I'm gonna add that came to my mind when you said that. What I'm dealing with, I there's this thing where trying to integrate what you know, right? We can do it. Like my son says, we say we're being fearless, but are we really acting from a place of being fearless and kind of being in space of where it's infinite, like where you're not fearing something, but at the same time you're grounded enough to be able to follow the laws of the earth, but you're in this space of being in this infinite space where you're trying to integrate that higher dimension at the same time. If you understand what I'm saying, it's kind of like, how do you kind of create a balance between the two, which is kind of what I'm struggling when it comes to, not for myself. Is it really coming from me being in a state of fear, or is it me being balanced and grounded enough where I'm trying to integrate earth and heavenly sort of infinite realities together as one? You know, if you understand what I'm saying, I kind of deal with this when it comes to my son, who thinks, you know, if you want to be fearless, then you got to be fearless. I'm like, no, you still got to you still got to wear your seatbelt. You still got to follow the rules of the land. You know, that's not me being fearful just because I'm afraid that the cop might show up. No, that's me respecting earth and respecting those rules. And I'm not, you know, so I'm like, I'm dealing with that right now. So it just reminded me when you were talking of what's the balance of integrating knowledge and you know, experience of it, and how to transcend your own limitations when it comes to the end of the day, and how to recognize those limitations and your limited beliefs around certain things, but then also recognizing what is respectful of the very earth we live in. So yeah.
Absolutely, beautifully expressed. I cut Abe off, and oh, Abe, I wanted to give you space again, and then Osama to follow up.
Yeah, I'm gonna beautiful, Sana, a beautiful way of saying that, because it's kind of reminding me of things that I struggle with at times with. Almost what comes up for me is conformity, challenging my own notions, safety and efficacy. It's like this one process of kind of figuring out what works best in respecting the safety net and the guise of the laws of the land, so to speak, because there is a balance and there is a maturity to go about that. It's wise in my truth. But I was going to take a step back because I think David, you talked about that, this like the culty, this culty piece of it, which I'm fascinated with. I mean, Osama could probably talk to you, like that is a buzzword for me. I'll go all in down a rabbit hole. I'm fascinated with these systems, and um, as a clinician, as a scholar practitioner who loves studying theories when it comes to helping people, in truth, seems like understand who they are and their functioning. Like that's the baseline of it. The thing of how I approach a lot of times, or at least what I'm playing with, which kind of has this point of intersectionality. I was sharing this with Sam and Antwan a while back, is a different theoretical orientation, at least what works best for me. I'm practicing it internally. In the investigation process, that first part that I notice a lot of people take, it requires like a lot of truth. It requires a lot of honesty and certainly sincerity for me to go through that process. The second thing of that integration piece, there's a lot of things that also come with that. Then when things kind of slowly start to click together and I can kind of see the rationale of certain situations, taking the lead of certain situations or in my own right, there is this like illuminating period, this thing of just natural things are just flowing effortless on and on and on. At least I'm trying to describe that sensation for me in simple terms for time's sake. Most theories I've noticed stop there. And they maybe stop there because of the I know better, or it is this way because this is the cap, this is the limit. Where I love to go is letting it go and throwing it into the innovation period, where this got you here. What's the conduit of the ongoing growth that's next for you? What other things that are completely out of my control to never be of I know better because I've done this for so many years. This is my paper telling me this, or my degree telling me this, or my seasonality at this job. It comes up for me. There is that resistance that comes up for me based on the sweat equity that I put in to it. So I write that down to always remind myself that I don't know, and there is going to be a period of true growth that I'm able to, God willing, wholeheartedly witness another person go through that is truly innovative, and it's going to put me back. It's going to put me in this continuum of growth to this new period, again, of investigation, and then of integration, and then of illumination, and then innovate, and then woo, a new continuum of new investigation. I don't know, that came up for me in a beautiful way, I think, hearing you guys express these things. So I just want to kind of share that, because it kind of thank you guys for giving me the space to say that out loud. That's the least I can say, because it clicked a lot of things for me. I'm not sure if it added value for any of you.
Absolutely added value for me. Thank you very much for expressing it. Beautifully expressed, as usual. Osama.
Yeah, well, actually, I forgot what I was talking about before, but this, what you just shared, Abe, is on point with what seems like maybe I don't remember if if Robert talked about what happens when knowledge and real-time learning are integrated. Now what happens? The dynamic and the process of knowledge and real-time learning, how they're integrating together. And I think you just did that in explaining that process between knowledge and real-time learning and the integration process, not what the end result is, but the actual integration process of them. Which, by the way, RM is asking about, the process that you just shared, the illuminating, investigating, the 4 eyes. If you can even write them in the section. But I think that's a beautiful way to describe that process, which again leaves this this continuous, not in every moment, but the direction is continuous growth. Investigate, integrate, illuminate, innovate. Beautiful.
Or
Absolutely beautiful.
another easy way of saying it is eliminating pride and discovering new levels of pride within you, where you thought you were humble, you're not. I think humbleness is the ultimate energy of the universe, that it will carry you so far. I was like, okay, I'm just gonna be humble in this moment, and everything's gonna work out for me, no matter what. I'm a simple person, like a shepherd. I don't understand a lot. I just know very simple concepts. I recognize pride right now. That's all. Yeah. Oh my God.
Beautiful. Beautiful. And
But
David?
really, oh, the last thing, it's each. I was on another call about 2 weeks ago, and I don't know if I shared this with, I say Osama and Antwan because I talk to them so frequent, you know. I mean, actually, I was talking to my wife about it, and she came home from working a very long day. She takes the train from New York to come back to the house, and I usually wrap up around, so far it's been around 8:30. So she'll come up, there's stairs here, she's sitting on the stairs, and as soon as I finish calls, my brain is just thinking of so many thoughts. And the thought struck me about consciousness. I don't know, for some reason it's coming up here when Senna, when you're talking about this is me, this is what's coming up for me. I was looking at my foot, in truth. I was looking at my big toe, and I said, if my big toe was just it was truly conscious. My big toe had consciousness, it was its own thing. What would I have to convince and say to my big toe to know that it's actually attached to my body, that it's not a separate entity? Like, what would I have to say, phrase, or eloquently express for this conscious toe to know that it isn't of its own accord? But it is, but it isn't. It's part of the whole thing. And I'm saying that from this outside bird's eye view, um, the privilege that I'm in to be able to see very vulnerable moments and explore that vulnerability in a safe container with many people always prompts me to reflect time and time again. It almost appears that we're just one thing, like unity in action, but it's so easy for me to slip and see the separateness of our experiences in life. And the greatest experience that I'm caught on time and time again is the fragment of a moment to showcase and shine light that oneness is, it is. It's just that. And every time that I think of it, it just slips away. But that oneness is so profound and beautiful. And hearing Senna, your process, it sheds light for me because it's a complete, your expression is such a profound unknown for me, linguistically, somatically, and emotionally, that's shining light for me to perceive oneness even more through your lens, where I see you as you, but I'm also witnessing me through you in this digital Zoom set. You know what I mean? Like it's a gift, and it's a precious gift that you are that. Same with Osama, same with Antwan, same with David, same with RM, and everybody else. For me, I always want to learn how to stretch that moment of observation just a little bit longer every single time. where it's not, you know, a 2-second walk and the breeze is just hitting my face. I'm like, oh, this is it. This is precious. And then gone, like a fart in the wind, as they say. Like it's a very, you know, it's like, ugh. And I can try my best to force it, to really squeeze it, to set it and do it. But it's not the same. It's not there. So this is kind of prompting me again, to kind of bear witness to that, as beautifully expressed by you, Sana, to kind of stitch that together for me, that we're all really, truly, I don't believe that we're all separate. We all are, there is this oneness to everything. But what are the prompts and phrases? Because they're always going to change because we're so darn clever, that I have to say and remind myself or shock myself to wake me up again to that. Does that make sense? That's kind of what I heard. That it's threading something for me in such a precious way. So thankful.
Makes complete sense. Before we continue, thank you for sharing, Abe and
My pleasure.
Sana and David and Osama, and you in the comments, RM. David, before you continue, I wanted to let everyone know that we have 9 minutes left. So, and even though we spoke all about fundamental state of leadership, and we definitely touched on what it is, we haven't directly said what Robert says it is yet. And maybe we can, maybe the last 3 or 4 minutes speak on that. But for now, let's give the floor to David, and also RM, if you wanted to pop in with a comment in the comment section, or even your voice, whatever feels comfortable, you have the space to also.
I'll try to go fast. So many things, but the last thing you were saying, Abe, it's like that, you know, the moment, it's like you experience it and then you grasp at it and it becomes solidified and therefore temporary. You know what I mean? Like you give it a separate, oh, a thing. I want this thing, this little jewel, right? And then it's poof, you know, and that's just like kind of like you'll have like experiences even in meditation where you're like, ah, oh, it's me, and you know. But anyway, I want to kind of go back to like the first time Abe was talking. You sort of brought up this really important point that was kind of like an alarm in my brain when I was first reading this, and that it's this idea of like people have to be kind of like prepared, or there has to be, you have to be aware of like within a group dynamic when you're introducing new things, right? And this is something I learned a lot from teaching, is everyone has, and forgive me if I've said this before because I say it all the time, everyone has this zone of proximal development, right? Where it's like if you imagine you as a point, and then there's this area outside of that point that's sort of safe zone, and the further you get away, the harder it gets to actually develop something. So you want to go far enough so that there's a little strain, because that's growth, right? And that's something like we always used to tell our students, like, oh, my brain hurts. That's good. That means you're learning, you know? But like, if you go past that, it just creates like trauma for them, you know, and they shut down or they react in a negative way. And so I think that's like a huge piece for like that person I was talking about at my job. It was always kind of like, I'm good, you know. It's like you have to figure out this way of bringing them in and helping them learn and get that knowledge in a way where it's not shaking their core too much, right? And so the next example I was kind of thinking of was like, you know, you have your team, but then like your company or your job hires an outside consultant to come in. And that's where I've seen like the most like resistance, because you have someone who's coming from outside, they have no knowledge of your culture or anything, and all of a sudden they start asserting themselves, and then it's like, you know, explosion happens. And that was like huge for me a lot. Like when consultants would come in, oh, you should be doing things like this. It's like, I'm sorry, you don't even know how I do things, and you're telling me I need to change, you know, that kind of stuff. So again, that's like way outside the zone of proximal development. So I'm sorry if that kind of like went way back and derailed from, your wonderful commentary or comments. But anyway, I'll wrap it up there so we can sort of get to the meat of the matter.
Thanks for sharing, David.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing. Did I cut you off, or was there a little bit more that you were saying? Okay. And I want to read what RM said in the comments.
Well, make sure you read the top, because she had a question. RM had a question earlier,
Oh, I
which
thought
actually
Abe.
was
Oh,
really beautiful.
right here. What question will you ask when you are in clingy state to inform junkie without application? And what question will you ask when you are in experimental junkie state? Are you saying what question do you ask yourself or ask another person?
Well, I think both, either way, right? Like if
Well,
somebody
I think, oh, sorry.
if somebody is an information junkie, right, without application. So it's like kind of like I think that she RM asked this question when we were talking about you know, scholar mystic or scholar practitioner, you know, it mentioned that as well. So if it's one person, right, who, okay, let's say somebody's listening to this, who maybe have some level of self-awareness to know that, wait a second, I am in some sense information junkie. What, or maybe somebody's not aware yet, actually. Maybe somebody's not aware that they're information junkie and that they like information and without application, and vice versa, somebody who's in a state of experiential state junkie kind of, but they're not aware. What questions would lead somebody to that awareness? And if it's somebody in our lives, I guess maybe that's a different approach. But let's go to the individual as a individual question.
I think that's a good idea, just because I think mostly for this paper, it's ultimately about your subjective experience. And so you're needing to reflect these questions on your own experience with yourself and how the changing state of your being allows the outward environment to hopefully at some point match that. As far as how to use this information, I'm paraphrasing because I don't know that you're asking this exact question in a sort of a self-defense kind of way, because there are people who are like manifestation and all that kind of stuff. I don't know if it's oriented towards that. Not that you're actually asking, I have no idea. But as far as that other part of the question that Osama's talking about, is a subjective experience we should be asking ourselves, according to this model, ourselves these questions that he's presenting in the fundamental state of leadership. And speaking of the fundamental state of leadership, since we haven't really spoke about what that is, according to Robert, maybe I'll just read a little bit about what he's saying that is from a place that I highlighted, if I could find it, in our last minute of our thing. Let me find it. And it's on page 7, right? Oh no, it starts on the end of page 6, right?
Wait, before we go there, are you using that to answer RM's question? Is that what you're doing?
It's part of it.
Oh, okay.
I think it's part of it because it's speaking about a change in the state of being that should, according to this model, trigger a state in how another person's behaving. The state that you're showing up as at the leading edge of your vulnerability, at the leading edge of your discomfort, not trauma, allows for a shift in the environment and the atmosphere. So if in any way this paper was going to be used to say, how should it be answered towards someone else who's behaving in a certain way, it would be by pointing to how your state of being should transform in order to enact something in the environment or to shift something in the environment. From what Robert is saying is the fundamental state of leadership. Other than that, It's a paper to point to your subjective experience of questioning yourself in your own out of integrities in order to come back into integrity with yourself. And so I'll just read a little bit about the fundamental state of leadership. Sorry, y'all, it's 8:30. Just bear with me like 1 minute and I'll close this out. And then whoever would like to stay and talk can absolutely stay and talk. So I'll just start it from maybe where's the if the first paragraph is a sentence that says it focuses in on our current state of being. And this is at the bottom of page 6, the second to last paragraph, under the title Entering the Fundamental State of Leadership. It focuses in on our own current state of being. More specifically, it focuses on a topic we prefer to avoid: our own current lack of integrity and virtue. The capacity to learn and anxiety is a distinguishing feature of the effective leader, which indicates that positive organizing occurs concurrently with wading into circumstances and dealing with whatever unexpected event occurs using tools that themselves were unexpected recombinations of existing repertoires. To lead is to be adaptive, to make personal change, and to help others change. Sentiment suggests that personal change happens when we unfreeze our defenses and look internally to determine what is ultimately important to us. Herbert suggests that the confidence to learn in the face of uncertainty is a function of integrity. He goes on to suggest that we build our integrity through constant self-monitoring or increasing awareness of our lack of integrity. I wanted to make sure I put that in there so that like it could just round out this discussion about like what Robert is talking about is the fundamental state of leadership and what comes out of it, the presence of which would not have come out of it if we're stuck in externally closed states of being and trying to lead ourselves from there. Okay, 3 minutes over.
Yeah,
that is the closing. Feel free to talk about whatever you guys want to. That's the end though, and then we can keep going.
I just wanted to say beautiful. Yeah, I just want to put, of course, we're over time, but I just wanted to express something back to that. I love how it's truly pointing directly to the self in part of everything that's kind of coming up, which again intersects to a lot of the texts in the books that we read thus far. Is something about it. It's just saying it in a different way. And then to peel it back on a personal level to RM, to your question of what questions will you ask when you are in one's information state or the experience junkie state? For me, it's usually the opposite. What I mean is this: if I am in a state of the information junkie, the antidote in that would be action. And a question that I can maybe present to myself is, what will I do with this knowledge? So the doing is this perceived notion of a movement. There's action behind it. And if I'm in a state of the experiencing or an experiential junkie, the antidote at most is reflection. And the thing that I was noting down is in that, I would say, what am I learning from this experience? If I fluctuate between, or the oscillation between both of those questions, it puts movement behind knowledge and wisdom behind experience, and the line that they both intersect at or on is understanding. And then once I'm in that state of understanding, it prompts me to become more innovative, to then again point back to another thing, kind of going back to that the eyes that I shared, to investigate even further from a different state of observation. Does that make sense? So in truth, it's an ongoing cycle. Welcome to the club of being human. I don't know what else. Welcome to the club. That's the easiest. I'm glad that this is recorded so I can listen back to it. because that was something I really needed to hear. Not the being human part, but what I said before that.
Can I ask a question?
You can
Can I
ask.
ask a question like kind of related to what both of you are saying? I just want to make sure I'm understanding it. So it's like this idea of pointing back to the self, and is there this notion of like influence through some sort of like self work, right? So it's rather than
Yes.
telling people, hey, you should do more of this, you should do more of this, you're kind of, it's sort of a living through example, right? Being really honest. I mean, there's this really interesting thing that I explored a lot is this idea of like everything is sort of created by the mind. I actually read this like Ibn Arabi quote earlier, which was similar to that. I can't remember the quote, but it was like the whole entire like external world is created in your mind. So when you're having problems with the external world, look at your mind, right? Rather than, yeah, you're giving me problems, you know, or I wish you would stop doing that because it bothers me so much. The question should be, why does that bother me so much? Right? And sort of go into that. And I'm sorry if this is veering off. I sometimes I feel like I'm getting a different take. But and then in that process, through sort of self-reflection, you know, illuminating and integrating, you're becoming sort of a light for others to take inspiration from, right? Is that sort of what it's saying?
In my opinion, right? Because I there's so many lenses you can look at it through, right? But in my opinion, while it's pointing to the self, and to take this perspective of let me step forward and show my vulnerability in this situation, it's in a container that in this organization we already have a shared commitment, a goal that I can point to, and in this shared commitment, I can expose my vulnerability to you, and ask myself these questions in doing it that will hopefully shift some roughness that we're having. I don't know that it's telling us that to look to the self. So in order to just digest ourselves, what's wrong going on. But I think it can. I feel like it's pointing to look to the self to digest what's happening, but also don't not respond to real time learning. I think to make it all an internal work without the relationship between the society and the individual would be another form of the spiritual bypassing. It would be another form of being externally closed. There has to be this back and forth relationship, according to what I feel like Robert is saying, between the individual and the group, individual and the tribe, on this, mutually turning into the self, and then having a mutual receptivity because of the exposing one's beingness and one's vulnerability and one's out of integrity into the situation.
And is that why he differentiated between this and flow?
I don't remember that sentence. Can you?
I don't know where it is, but I remember him sort of talking about like this idea of flow, and he was sort of looking at it as, okay, this is similar to flow, but the difference is flow is a strictly self-oriented thing where there's not, you're experiencing flow, right? But you're not necessarily like exposing vulnerabilities within yourself, right? You're just sort of in this transcendent state, but it's like bypass.
I think, well, in
That's great.
the yes, the flow thing, he put it as amoral,
Yeah.
right? Meaning like it can be, one can experience the flow for having flow experience, but it can be ethical or unethical. There's no doesn't matter, right? Like one can be in a flow state, but in an unethical act,
Yeah.
as he puts it, where he's trying to differentiate that the fundamental state of leadership is more ethically demanding. So even you can get into the flow state and flow experience, but it's ethically demanding, which is kind of an area that Abe mentioned before, where he's talking about the intuition and the work that needs to happen, right? So we're not just after this flow experience, but we're after this flow experience from an ethical, integral space, which requires a lot of work, and which that demanding, which is that tuition that Abe was talking about before, the cost, the cost of it. And at the same time, kind of like in the beginning of the paper, where he's talking about leadership is about influence as well, right? So that's a big part of it, right? That within these actions that are taking place, influence is taking place as well, right? Like part of this is part of this that I'm thinking about in the business world, like in an experience or in a situation of negotiation, right? I'm not at the what is the level of my vulnerability at that space, right? I'm in a state of negotiation. I'm in a state of influence. So all of these things, mind you, uh, you know, integrity and that ethical demand is still there, right? So that I'm not in a flow state of influence and negotiation, but I'm doing something shady that's going to be an unethical state. So, but yet I'm not going to be uh, in a state where what we quote unquote normally understand what vulnerability is, and just show all of our cards without having a poker face in the negotiation on the negotiation table. You know what I mean? It's there's a a way in order to get this win-win-win situation for the organization, for the team, for whatever it is, all of these different stuff. So um, I feel like he's also talking about that aspect as well, as far as the influence, um, perspective, which, I feel also Sanat talked about that earlier before, um, as far as like teamwork and all that kind of stuff.
It's also like what she was saying about like, the discussion she was having with her son. So it's this idea of just being completely fearless. Well, you can't go running into the highway, right? You still have to have this level of conduct, right? There's a saying, my view is vast as the sky, but my conduct is fine as barley flour, you know?
It's beautiful.
That's fire. I've never heard that before. Wow.
You got plenty of people who have view vast as the sky, and they're hurting people because they have no awareness of their, what they do. They're too enlightened to be aware of how their actions affect people. And that's bypass, right?
Right, and what Robert would call externally closed.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so profoundly important to always be aware of what's downstream of your actions.
Mm-hmm. Nice. You haven't got so much out of it. Oh, Abe?
I don't know, I was just saying it was beautiful to jump into this after my day. So I'm just grateful, just true gratitude and thankful for the opportunity of the space. And RM in the exchanges in the comments, I really am grateful for that because it's helping me refine something that's coming up. So thank you for that very much. And to that last comment, just thought information junkie and experiential junkie is a very premature. It was just terms that I used in this current setting. I used any term because that was the term of the situation. Yeah, but definitely I can understand that for sure. Thank you. That's all. And happy holiday. I know next week is the holiday season for everybody, so
Yes.
I wanted to wish
Happy
everybody,
New Year.
let's stretch our enlightenment with family.
Um,
The real work.
So I guess we're at our conclusion. It was beautiful discussion, y'all. Thank y'all so much for all the wisdom and insight that came forth. Amazing time. I'm really happy to be here in this space with y'all, sharing space with y'all.
Likewise.
Likewise. Happy holidays. This was absolutely amazing. Um, Grateful and thankful for this container and for everybody here and everybody who's listening and watching the replay of this and engaging with us in any type of way. Truly couldn't be possible without every single person here. Like this, it goes without saying, but it's needed, yo. Like it's, every single person, every single um, contribution, every single presence is um, is needed, and grateful and thankful for that. So, yeah, happy holidays.
Mm.
May it be a time of reflection and a time of joy and celebration and time of gratitude and thankfulness to be surrounded with people that we love and we get to exercise love and exercise being loved and exercise presence in love and yeah, celebrate and dance and sing and party and all that. Like, yeah, yeah, maybe a fruitful time for all of us here and listening and watching as well. Love your very, very much, deeply.
Love you too, bro. Love y'all.
See y'all next year.
See
See you
y'all.
next year. Enjoy, family.
There, y'all. Be well.
Be well.